This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. I'm fired up today.
Oh, me too. I think this could be, we've had a couple of weeks now of very, very competitive episodes.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is almost our grand final.
Oh, is that how you put it? Yeah, righto. I'm happy to go that way.
Only because I'm confident. If it goes the other way, it's just a preliminary. Now, our weekend show is obviously a little bit different to our weekday shows because here we are each nominating what we think is the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story, the sleeper story, and then our favourite story. We are joined every week by our adjudicator, who is our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Michael, and I'm fired up too.
Oh, excellent. Well, you know what? I think we just need to paint a little bit of a picture here that every week, Adam ranks our stories. You give us each a score out of 25 for each category that we do, and then kind of calculate a winner at the end. And you are a very organised, very precise person. And you have just showed to us the blank scorecard, the template that you have prepared for this week's.
Yes, possibly my most beautiful scorecard ever.
He's a real barrel of laughs, Adam.
Yeah.
Just great company over dinner.
The fact that you are so excited about having used a ruler to set up this particular scorecard says we're in for a treat.
Always room for improvement. Continuous evolution here at Fear and Greed.
All via WhatsApp message. Keep that in mind. I've got a story about WhatsApp later on. So, Adam, keep that in mind.
Okay.
Well, I think we should get into it.
Jump into it.
The biggest story of the week.
Yes.
You go. I went first last week, so you go first, Sean.
It's a late hours, eh? Markets. What a wild and woolly week. Let's start in the US. Equity markets tumbled. In fact, the broad-based S&P 500 after this week is now almost 25% below its peak of late last year. Imagine having $100,000 invested less than a year ago and now only having $75,000. Not happy, Jan. Bond markets tumbled in the US and Fed officials kept talking about big rate hikes, notwithstanding it's increasingly likely that US is heading into recession. Move across the pond to the United Kingdom, to Liz Truss world. And what a funny world it is over there. In the words of Supertramp, Adam, you listening? Crisis, what crisis? The Prime Minister of just 3 weeks managed to announce possibly the most ill-received and ill-conceived tax cuts ever. Certainly in recent decades. Ms. Truss's argument is that she wants to help the faltering economy. Everyone else's argument is that she's just added fuel to the inflation fire. Not only did that trigger a fall in UK assets, it was so poorly received around the world that global assets fell. And let's not talk about the pound. It's at its lowest level against the US ever. Don't you reckon a Prime Minister 3 weeks in the job would kind of just take it a little bit sensibly? Clearly not. Back home, it wasn't any better. The Aussie dollar fell below 64 US cents for the first time in a couple of years. The ASX S&P has fallen back to the bad days of COVID. It's off about 10% from its level of earlier in the year. Bonds have been sold off, pushing yields higher. In fact, the 10-year bond yield hit its highest level in more than a decade. There is nowhere to hide in financial markets. For a podcast called Fear and Greed, which is all about business, easily the biggest story of the week. Michael, how'd I sell it? Pretty good?
You sold that very well. If I was the adjudicator, I would be giving you a solid 17 out of 25 for that. That was a ripper. But I'll leave that up to Adam. The biggest story for me, well, actually, the thing about my biggest story is that it shouldn't be the biggest story anymore because it was actually last week. It was 9 or 10 days ago. But
Red flag.
This is the thing. Every day this week has still been dominated by the Optus cyber attack. And part of it, I suppose, is the scale of the attack. The fact that 10 million Australians have had their details exposed, kind of names, addresses, driver's license, even as we found out this week, 15,000 active Medicare numbers and more inactive ones. There are a few big developments this week that really kept it on the front page. The alleged hacker first released the details of 10,000 customers, threatening to release more if a ransom wasn't paid. then they changed their mind and said they deleted the data, which is just completely bizarre. Then the political element of it all was dialed up with Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill saying that Optus had left the door open to a, quote, basic hack. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said that Optus has to foot the bill for affected people wanting replacement passports. And how about this? Combined with the cost of replacing licenses, it's expected to see Optus fork out more than $1 billion. Isn't that huge? The AFP is involved, obviously not just in finding the hacker, but on Friday we heard that they were launching Operation Guardian to help protect those whose details were stolen. Finally, the lawyers are, of course, circling with the likelihood of class actions against Optus. There are so many angles to this, and I think the reason why everyone is still talking about it is because there are so many people affected and people just genuinely worried about the security of their financial accounts and of their identity that it is still the biggest story of the week. Adam.
Both big stories, both very well sold. I'm going to give the overselling to Sean, who kicked it off with saying the word markets 5 times.
Nice.
And it reminded me of a Jerry Harvey Norman ad.
Yes.
But beautifully set up. And Sean, you do win for the biggest story of the week. It is astounding what is going on. The scale of the money involved, the volatility of the fluctuations, what's happened in the UK, including geopolitics and Russia just keeping that escalation point up with their invasion of the Ukraine. So many things are so fragile and that's causing this volatility to go on and on and on. It's not going to stop here either, but I think it's been the biggest story of the week. Michael, Optus cyber attack has been in the headlines every single day. It's a rolling mall of stories, but just in terms of scale, I think Sean gets this one.
I think that's pretty fair. I think, look at me, magnanimous Michael. Feel free to use that.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to gloat a little bit just because you're magnanimous.
Magnanimous Michael. That's
magnanimous
the name.
MM.
That's
Righto,
right.
MM. What's the most remarkable story of the week for you?
The most remarkable story for me is actually a big story because after 2.5 years of public health orders and isolation rules, COVID cases are no longer required to isolate at home. So it recently changed from 7 days to 5 days. Now it's 0. Well, in a couple of weeks it will be. National Cabinet made the change on Friday following a big push by New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet. The AMA was very much opposed to it, warning of a spike in cases and saying that those pushing for isolation periods to be cut are not, quote, scientifically literate.
Didn't you love that?
That's a cracker of a line. Chief Medical Officer Paul Kelly, though, said that removing the isolation at this time is reasonable, but we will see future peaks and the advice may change. Pandemic leave payments are also set to end. There are exceptions to all of this, of course, high-risk settings like aged care, but for the most part, from October 14, the responsibility now shifts to people who have tested positive to just stay home without an order forcing them to. It is a huge change. I would say a pretty controversial change. And for that, I think it's remarkable.
Good story. Good story.
Thank you.
But
there it is. We knew it was coming. Well done.
Now, it is a remarkable story. And you know, I think normally I'll probably give that to you. But as I said, I reckon the most remarkable story this week, specifically this week, was the incredible push along renewable energy received. We've been talking about this for years, right? Since Kevin Rudd days, in fact, before Kevin Rudd days. But there are a couple of major announcements this week that totally changed the landscape. Remarkable. Number one, AGL Australia has bowed to shareholder pressure, bowed to the public, and will close the country's biggest carbon-emitting power plant 10 years earlier than planned. The smokestacks at Loy Yang A, the power plant that provides about 30% of Victoria's electricity, will be capped by 2035. Well, I don't know whether they're going to cap the smokestacks or not, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. Quite remarkable. Number two, the Queensland government this week said it will stop coal-fired generation in the state by 2035 and will spend $60 billion over 10 years in transmission infrastructure and renewables, including hydro. It's going to change the state's energy mix. It comes after New South Wales has announced $32 billion over 8 years for energy infrastructure. Victoria is spending $19 billion over 10 years for wind farms. Then you had the government's National Electric Vehicle Strategy discussion paper this week. Not sure what was in the water this week, and there's a lot of water around the East Coast at the moment, that's for sure. But suddenly, we all want renewables. That will also cause problems because there's going to be this rush to renewables and there's not enough there. All the while, the coal companies' share prices keep rising. Funny, funny world.
Adam, your verdict, please.
Okay, I'm saying this with some trepidation. Sean wins again.
What?
The reason for this one, we had an election on 21 May, and in just over 4 months, the tipping point towards green energy has clearly come and passed, and it's evidenced by the very things that Sean brought up from this week. They are massive and reflective of that tipping point, and it's come, albeit I think really from the election to now. Michael, yours is a massive case and it will affect everyone. It'll affect everyone who's got the disease and obviously the contagion levels amongst particularly the unvaccinated who don't have it. But I think Sean has to win on this one because of the scale of that tipping point and its impact on business.
Okay. All right. No, I accept the judge's decision, however
with
flawed.
gritted teeth.
No, it's a good call. No, well done, Sean. It is 2-0, I believe. We will come back in a second with the sleeper story of the week. All right, Sean, we are looking for the sleeper story of the week. So this is a story that's not getting the attention that it probably should get, or that is going to become a bigger story further down the track. Can I go first on this one?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, well, mine's actually kind of linked to your most remarkable story. And so I'm hoping the fact that your most remarkable story won, and I'm using part of that, will mean that I also win this category. And it is about the potential for a revival of the car manufacturing industry in Australia. Right. So there's been some encouraging signs this week. So it's a real sleeper story, actually. Infrastructure Minister Catherine King said a Tesla plant would absolutely be welcome in Australia. She said that the end of the local car manufacturing industry was, quote, incredibly disappointing, that there hasn't been a vehicle made here in Australia since Holden shut down 5 years ago. Tesla chair Robin Denholm recently said that the company would love to have a plant on every continent because of the growing demand, obviously, for electric vehicles. We have a long way to go in Australia. The government, as you mentioned, Sean, launched this week its EV consultation paper, with electric vehicles making up less than 2% of light vehicle sales last year compared to 9% globally. One way this might improve is if vehicles were produced here, potentially increasing supply and lowering the cost because they don't need to be shipped internationally. So with Tesla keen on local production and clearly the government supportive of it, there might just be hope for Australian vehicle manufacturing after all. And I think that is a ripper of a sleeper story.
So much potential there.
What, the story has potential or the manufacturing industry has potential?
Potentially something might happen.
Yeah.
Just pointing that out. So, I want to tell you about the story. It's a real sleeper because unless you listen to Fear and Greed this week, you probably don't know about it. So the US Securities and Exchange Commission, better known as the SEC, has fined 16 financial firms, and we're talking really big players like Barclays, Bank of America, Citigroup, Credit Suisse, Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, UBS. Those guys got fined a combined $1.1 billion for failing to maintain and preserve electronic communications. So, why do we care about that? Because what people inside the banks were doing were having pretty normal discussions about clients via text or WhatsApp, a process that's been known to occur at Fear and Greed. In fact, we had an example in this podcast about Adam's point system and how it's on WhatsApp. So something that has been happening pretty much at Fear and Greed and pretty much in every organisation I've ever worked in. The thing is, that company isn't really preserving that conversation, and under SEC rules, the majority of conversations about clients need to be preserved. Can you imagine the potential ramifications for anyone operating in the US, including Australian firms. What if the ruling flows to Australia, as many of these things do? It could totally change the way people work. No more texting to each other, no more WhatsApp messages. Everything has to go through official channels. Can you imagine having to do everything in Teams? Oh, what a disaster. Big sleeper story.
Adam, what do you reckon?
Well, before I mention anything, I should suggest that perhaps we too should have disclosed records on WhatsApp messages between all of us about my judging, say, as they go on between you.
Nice retort. That's good.
So, and I say that knowing I'm just going to get an avalanche for this one. Sean wins again.
I'm enjoying today.
One of those days where you just wonder why you even bothered to turn up.
Michael, your story is excellent. It is, though, based on potential. And I would love for manufacturing to come back of anything in Australia because we do so little of it, including cars. But I wonder too whether the element of your story that is one to watch out for in the future is this is really emblematic of the forces against globalization in general. Whether it's food production or manufacturing, whatever it is, what we've seen through supply chain issues in the last couple of years does push us back towards manufacturing things here. So I think yours is a good potential sleeper story.
Can I add that bit in now?
No. I was just going to say you should have said that because I reckon you would have got the win if you actually thought the story through further, as Adam has obviously done.
Ouch.
Nice work, Adam.
Stop with the fake praise, Sean. It's not helping me.
Oh, right.
Now, this SEC thing, my God, you can imagine how many people are exposed on this, right?
Oh, totally. We all do it.
It is, do we, Sean?
But we absolutely, don't you, any organisation, haven't you text someone saying, oh, I'm going to catch up with, Jane from ABC because I need to talk to her about whatever?
Typically not, but I think I'm more the exception than the norm, really.
Okay, Michael, help me out. Adam is not normal.
I do understand your point, though, and that is why I have awarded you the win. I think it is massive.
Okay, let's get on to our favourite story. I think we normally do a score check here. Is it 1 to 2?
You know what? I don't think the score's important anymore.
No, it's
Fear
not.
and
Greed is the winner.
Yeah. News is the winner this week. Sean, you go first for the favourite story.
Okay, look, I'm not sure that this is my favourite story in the traditional manner, but as a journalist, watching the story unfold has really been quite amazing this week. It's the absolute devastation and human kindness wrought by Hurricane Ian, first in Cuba and then into southwest Florida in the US, across the Panhandle, back out to sea, before heading back towards Georgia and the Carolinas. We don't know how many died, although President Joe Biden said it could be the deadliest hurricane to hit Florida. The flooding and scenes of boats and aircraft on roadways and upside down was actually just crazy, really. Cuba lost power across the whole nation. Millions in the US were evacuated and millions lost power. There's horrific tales of people just not knowing where loved ones are, as well as incredibly heartwarming tales of kindness to strangers. And the story's been incredibly well covered. So we've seen all the traditional on-the-ground reporters, people with microphones and wind howling past them, but right through to stories about and videos of pilots deliberately flying through the eye of the storm to collect information and the turbulence they're experiencing. Really quite amazing story. I mean, I don't know, I could call it my favourite story in that you wish this didn't ever happen, but truly an amazing story to watch unfold.
Yeah, an extraordinary one. And you're right, the footage of the plane flying through the storm and the turbulence and just going every way and everything flying around the cabin of the aircraft. Horrifying.
The courage of those people. I get scared on a big A380 that has a little bump.
Yeah.
And these guys are just sitting there and they looked pretty calm. I don't know whether they were.
Yeah, and you know it's bad when they say that I've been doing this for decades and this was the worst I've ever encountered. And you're like, wow, that must be bad.
What a way to cover the story. But that's my favourite story. Michael, what about you?
Look, for me, there's probably no surprise that I've chosen this one as my favourite story of the week. Space. It's quite simply just space. Early in the week, we saw NASA successfully smash a spacecraft into an asteroid. Now, minor kind of detail, and I feel like Adam kind of pointing out the minor little things here, but it wasn't actually the asteroid itself that was hit. It's a small kind of micro moon traveling around the asteroid. And we won't actually know for a few months if the mission was technically a success, because it'll take that long to figure out whether the impact of the spacecraft into the rock was enough to move it out of its normal orbit around the asteroid. But still, kind of minor technical details aside, what an incredible achievement this was, particularly when you consider some of the stats involved. The spacecraft traveled something like 7 million miles to get to the asteroid. When it collided, it was moving at about 22,500 kilometers per hour. And after all of that, it hit just 17 meters from its target. NASA described it as, quote, basically a bullseye. I would say that's pretty much a bullseye.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. The first ever attempt by humanity to move another body in space. Preparation for a scenario that obviously we hope won't ever happen, an asteroid kind of cruising directly for Earth. And even better, images of the collision were captured. They were released on Friday, captured by everybody's favorite space telescopes, Hubble and James Webb, working together for the first time. You've got this cooperation, international cooperation, a global effort, planetary defense. The scale is huge. Favorite story. What do you think, Adam?
Well, but while you're just thinking about this, Adam, and I'm actually not saying this to sway you, I mean that quite genuinely, is it worth the money, Michael?
Yes. If it's going to save Earth, I think that's a fairly good investment.
Yeah. So we've had an asteroid hurt Earth about 60 million years ago. Am I right in saying that? There's certainly some time ago they suspect that's what happened. When I thought that, I mean, it's incredible, like phenomenal story that they can get that close to 17 meters from the target is ridiculous at across 7 million miles. But then I thought to myself, they would have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on that. Is it a good spend of money? Oh, I'm not really sure.
I think if it saves all of humanity,
I suppose so.
What price can you put on billions of lives?
That works out about 20 cents a life. Yeah, no, probably worth it.
I'm actually in a state of disbelief that we're actually discussing this.
I thought I was the one with an eye for detail. But anyway, back to the stories. I can't split it. The kindness and courage within Hurricane Ian's stories is incredible. And I think it's equal to the genius in the NASA story. I just can't split them. So I'm going to have to give you half each.
Okay.
Do you call that a clean sweep or not?
No, 3.5 to half. I have never clung so tightly to half a point before. It's a very important. Hey, can we ask Adam what the actual score was overall then, once you've given each category an individual score out of 25?
The odd thing here is that you'll end up with more points than me.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for. Let's see.
Sean, you've ended up the day with a personal best at 95 points.
Oh, wow.
And Michael, it's not quite a personal worst, but 80 points.
I love your scoring, Adam. It is eclectic. Might be the word I'm looking for.
Erratic is the word I would go for.
Arbitrary.
Yeah. Anyway, look, I think the main thing is we've covered all the big stories of the week.
That's right.
And that is really the goal here, that to make sure that we get across all of the news of the week. I think we've done that. So thank you very much, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson. Have a great weekend.